She must face justice. The crowd's voices echoed through the castle courtyard as Maya Johnson stood before the royal tribunal, chains around her wrists. Thousands of faces filled with anger surrounded her, mothers who'd lost sons, wives who'd lost husbands, children who'd lost fathers. All because she loved the wrong man. "Banish the kingdom destroyer," someone called out. Maya's dress was torn, her face marked by tears, but her eyes held unwavering strength as she looked up at the judgment platform. The same platform where she'd once danced with Prince Ryan at the summer festival. Where he'd whispered, "I love you," against her ear while the kingdoms celebrated around them. That was before the betrayal that split the realm in two. Before brother turned against brother. Before love became forbidden. The judge raised his decree. In 60 seconds, Maya Johnson would face her sentence. The woman who changed the mightiest empire in history would learn her fate. But first, let me tell you how we got here. Hey, incredible viewers! I need you to prepare yourselves because what you're about to hear will touch your heart deeply. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your location in the comments. I want to know where in the world people are ready for this amazing story. And if you're not subscribed, hit that button now because this tale will stay with you forever. 6 months ago, Maya Johnson was invisible. A servant girl who cleaned floors in the royal castle, who tended to chambers and maintained the great halls. Nobody noticed her. Nobody knew her name. Nobody except Prince Ryan. The first time he saw her, she was working diligently in the castle library, carefully organizing ancient books. Prince Ryan had wandered in seeking quiet from another demanding royal ceremony, took one look at this girl with determination in her eyes, and felt everything change. "What's your name?" he'd asked gently. She'd looked up, amber eyes sparkling. "Nobody of importance, Your Highness." "That's not what I asked." "Maya," she'd whispered. He should have walked away. A prince doesn't fall for servant girls. A future king doesn't risk everything for someone the nobility considers beneath their station. But Ryan took one step closer. Then another. Until he was standing beside her among the books, their hearts beating as one. "Maya," he repeated, like her name held magic. That's when it started. The most extraordinary love story in history. For months they met in secret. Empty corridors at midnight. Quiet gardens at dawn. He'd bring her books from the royal collection. She'd tell him stories about life beyond castle walls. He taught her about history. She taught him about hope. The night everything changed, Maya was organizing the throne room when Ryan rushed in, eyes filled with worry. "They're arranging my marriage to Princess Catherine tomorrow," he said. "The agreements are signed. My father says I have no choice." Maya's heart shattered. "Then marry her." "I can't." His voice trembled. "I love you." "Love isn't always enough," she whispered, tears flowing down her cheeks. "Then I'll find a way to make it enough." That's when Prince Ryan made the decision that changed them both forever. The choice that would reshape kingdoms and alter countless lives. He took her hands. Right there in the throne room where kings had ruled for centuries. And his brother Prince David witnessed everything. Within hours, the castle was in chaos. King Richard was furious beyond words. Queen Elizabeth was devastated. The engagement to Princess Catherine ended, triggering conflict with the northern kingdoms. Prince David claimed Maya had used forbidden arts to enchant his brother. But the real heartbreak came from someone Maya trusted completely. Someone who revealed her secrets for reward. Someone who gave her private letters to the king. Someone whose betrayal would spark the most devastating division in the kingdom's history. Now Maya stood before the royal tribunal, facing judgment for her choices. The crowd demanded justice. The woman who dared to love a prince was about to learn her fate. But she had one final revelation. One last truth that could transform the kingdom, or change it forever. "Before you pass judgment," Maya said, her voice carrying across the silent crowd, "there's something you must know." She placed her hand over her heart, then looked directly at the king. "I carry the future heir to your throne." The courtyard erupted into shocked whispers. Who betrayed Maya's trust? Whose actions started the Great Division? And how will the news of a royal heir change everything, including Maya's destiny? The silence in the courtyard stretched like a held breath. Maya's words hung in the air, I carry the future heir to your throne," and she watched as the king's face shifted from rage to something far more dangerous: calculation. But to understand how we reached this moment, you need to know who Maya Johnson really was. Not the servant girl everyone saw, but the woman Prince Ryan fell in love with. Maya had arrived at the castle 3 years ago with nothing but the clothes on her back and a heart full of dreams. Her parents had died in the great storm that devastated the southern villages, leaving her orphaned at 17. The castle offered work, food, and shelter, everything a girl with no family needed to survive. What it didn't offer was hope. Until Ryan. Let me paint you a picture of Maya that will make you understand why a prince would risk everything for her. She wasn't traditionally beautiful. Her nose was slightly crooked from a childhood accident, her hands were rough from years of hard work, and she had this habit of biting her lip when she was nervous. But when Maya smiled, truly smiled, it was like watching the sun break through storm clouds. More than that, Maya had this incredible gift: she could see people's hearts. Not with magic or special powers, but with pure empathy. She'd notice when the head cook was grieving her sick grandson. She'd leave wildflowers by the window of the lonely old groundskeeper. She'd hum softly while working, and somehow that simple melody would lift the spirits of everyone around her. "Maya makes everything brighter," the other servants would say. "She makes you believe tomorrow might be better than today." Prince Ryan had spent his entire life surrounded by people who wanted something from him. Nobles who flattered him for favor. Ladies who smiled sweetly while calculating his worth. Advisors who saw him as a chess piece in their political games. Maya was the first person who ever looked at him and saw just Ryan. Now let me tell you about Prince Ryan Constantine, because understanding him will break your heart in the most beautiful way. At 25, Ryan was everything the kingdom expected from their future king. Tall and strong, with kind eyes and a smile that could charm anyone. He was skilled with a sword, brilliant with strategy, and genuinely cared about his people's welfare. The perfect prince. Except Ryan had a secret that ate at him every single day. He was terrified of becoming king. Not because he was weak or cowardly. Ryan would face any physical danger without hesitation. But the thought of making decisions that could affect millions of lives. The idea of carrying the weight of an entire kingdom on his shoulders? It kept him awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if he'd ever be enough. His father, King Richard, was a legend. A warrior who'd expanded their borders, a diplomat who'd forged lasting peace with neighboring kingdoms, a ruler whose very presence commanded respect. How do you follow a legend? "You'll learn," the king would say whenever Ryan expressed his doubts. "Leadership comes with experience." But Ryan feared he'd learn too late, that his mistakes would cost lives, that he'd let down everyone who believed in him. That's why he wandered the castle at odd hours. That's why he sought quiet places where he could think, where he could just be Ryan instead of Prince Ryan. And that's why, on that fateful morning 6 months ago, he found himself in the castle library at dawn. Maya was there, as she was every morning before her official duties began, teaching herself to read using the simple children's books. She'd progressed from picture books to basic stories, sounding out words under her breath, her finger following each line with careful concentration. Ryan watched from the doorway, fascinated. Here was someone fighting to better herself, not because she had to, not because anyone expected it, but because she hungered for knowledge. Because she believed in her own potential. "Good morning," he said softly, not wanting to startle her. Maya looked up, and Ryan saw something he'd never seen before in anyone's eyes when they looked at him. No awe, no calculation, no fear. Just genuine curiosity and a hint of embarrassment at being caught. "Your Highness," she said, starting to stand. "I'm sorry, I didn't know you used the library this early. I'll leave." "Please don't," Ryan said quickly. "What are you reading?" She held up the book, a collection of fairy tales. I'm learning," she admitted, her cheeks coloring. "I know it's probably silly for someone my age." "It's not silly at all," Ryan said, and meant it completely. "May I?" That's how it started. Ryan sitting beside Maya in the quiet library, helping her with difficult words, listening as she read aloud in her soft, careful voice. What began as an accidental meeting became a daily ritual. Every morning at dawn, before the castle woke up, they'd meet among the books. And slowly, carefully, they began to share pieces of their souls. Maya told him about her parents, How her mother used to braid flowers in her hair and sing lullabies in the old language. How her father taught her that kindness was the only true strength. She spoke of her dreams to see the ocean someday, to learn about the world beyond their kingdom's borders. Ryan told her about the crushing weight of expectations, the loneliness of being surrounded by people who could never truly be his friends because they were either above or below his station. He confessed his fears about ruling, his worry that he'd never measure up to his father's legacy. "You know what I think," Maya said one morning, closing the book they'd been reading together. "I think you're going to be an even better king than your father." Ryan laughed, but not unkindly. "You barely know me." "I know enough," Maya said firmly. "Your father rules through strength and tradition. But you have something he doesn't." "What's that?" "You see people. Really see them. Like you saw me reading here instead of just dismissing a servant girl who doesn't belong." Maya's eyes met his. "A king who truly sees his people? That's the kind of king who changes the world." That was the moment Ryan realized he was falling in love. Not with Maya's face or her voice, but with her heart. With the way she believed in him when he couldn't believe in himself. With the way she saw potential in everyone, including a prince who felt lost in his own castle. But Maya had her own moment of realization too. It came 3 weeks later, when Ryan arrived at the library with a bandaged hand. "What happened?" she asked, immediately reaching for his injured hand without thinking. "Training accident," Ryan said, but something in his voice made Maya look closer. "That's not a training wound," she said softly. "That's from kitchen work. You've been helping in the kitchens." Ryan flushed. The head cook mentioned they were short-handed because of the festival preparations. I thought maybe I could help." Maya stared at him. Here was a prince, the future king, secretly working in kitchens because he wanted to help his people. Not for glory or recognition, but because it was the right thing to do. "You really are going to change everything," she whispered. That's when Ryan took her hand, the first time they'd truly touched. His fingers intertwined with hers, and Maya felt her heart skip. "Not me," Ryan said quietly. "Us." Dear viewers, I need you to understand something crucial here. This wasn't just attraction or infatuation. This was two lonely souls recognizing their perfect match. Maya saw Ryan's true heart beneath the crown. Ryan saw Maya's incredible spirit beneath her humble station. They were falling in love with each other's dreams, fears, hopes, and flaws. The kind of love that happens once in a lifetime, if you're lucky enough to find it at all. But love between a prince and a servant girl? In a kingdom where bloodlines determined everything? Where Maya could be dismissed for even speaking to Ryan without permission? It was impossible, forbidden, dangerous, and absolutely unstoppable. Comment below and tell me, have you ever felt that instant connection with someone that made your heart recognize home? Because Maya and Ryan were about to discover that some loves are worth any risk, even if that risk is everything they've ever known. Because tomorrow morning, something would happen that would test their growing love in ways they never imagined. A crisis that would force Ryan to choose between his duty as a prince and his feelings for Maya. And Maya would make a discovery about her own past that would change everything she thought she knew about herself. What crisis will test their love? What secret from Maya's past changes everything? And how long can they keep their growing feelings hidden in a castle full of watching eyes? The crisis came at dawn on the feast of St. Helena, when screams shattered the morning silence. Maya was already in the library, waiting for Ryan as she did every morning, when the castle bells began ringing in frantic alarm. Not the gentle chimes that announced meals or ceremonies, but the harsh, desperate clanging that meant only one thing: emergency. She ran to the window and gasped. Smoke was rising from the village below. Black, thick smoke that spoke of houses burning and lives in danger. "Maya!" Ryan burst through the library doors, still in his nightclothes but already reaching for his sword. "There's been an attack on Millbrook Village. Raiders from the Northlands." "How many people?" Maya asked, her heart racing. "We don't know yet. Father's mobilizing the guard, but—" Ryan stopped, looking at her with an expression she'd never seen before. Desperate. Torn. "Maya, I have to go. I have to lead the rescue." "Of course you do," she said immediately. "Go. Save them." But Ryan didn't move. Instead, he crossed the room in 3 quick steps and took her hands in his. "I need you to know something," he said urgently. "Before I ride out there, before I face whatever's waiting in that village, I need you to know that these past months with you have been the happiest of my life." Maya's breath caught. "Ryan." "I love you," he said simply. "I know it's impossible. I know it's foolish. But I love you, Maya Johnson, and I needed you to hear it from me before." He didn't finish the sentence, but Maya understood. Before he rode into danger. Before he risked his life for his people, as any good prince should. "I love you too," she whispered, the words tumbling out like water through a broken dam. "I've loved you since that first morning when you sat beside me and helped me read about dragons and fairy tale kingdoms." Ryan's eyes closed in relief, as if he'd been holding his breath for weeks waiting to hear those words. And then he kissed her. Not the gentle, hesitant first kiss of uncertain lovers, but the desperate, passionate kiss of 2 people who'd found their soulmate and didn't know if they'd ever get another chance. Maya melted into him, her hands tangling in his hair, her heart singing even as tears streamed down her cheeks. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ryan rested his forehead against hers. "When I come back," he said, "we'll figure this out. Somehow, someway, we'll find a path forward." "When you come back," Maya agreed, "I'll be waiting." Ryan squeezed her hands once more, then turned and ran from the library, leaving Maya alone with her racing heart and the taste of love on her lips. What neither of them knew was that Prince David Constantine had been searching for his brother to discuss battle strategy. What neither of them realized was that he'd heard every word through the library's open door. What they couldn't have imagined was that David's shock would quickly turn to something far more dangerous: opportunity. You see, viewers, Prince David had lived his entire life in Ryan's shadow. The younger brother who was almost as skilled, almost as charming, almost as beloved, but never quite enough to matter. Ryan was the heir. David was the spare. Ryan got the crown. David got the leftovers. But this changed everything. As David stood frozen outside the library door, his mind raced through the possibilities. A prince in love with a servant girl wasn't just scandal. It was treason against everything their kingdom stood for. The bloodline. The nobility. The careful alliances that kept their realm strong. More than that, it was David's chance to finally step out of his brother's shadow. While Ryan rode hard toward Millbrook Village with 50 knights behind him, David went straight to his father's chambers. King Richard was pacing before the great map, red markers showing the spread of the Northland raids, when David knocked. "Come," the king barked without looking up. "David, what are you doing here? You should be preparing to ride out with the second wave." "Father," David said carefully, "there's something you need to know about Ryan. Something that could compromise his judgment as our future king." King Richard finally looked up, his eyes sharp. In all their years, David had never brought him concerns about his brother. The 2 princes had always been united, always loyal to each other above all else. "What are you talking about?" David took a breath. The next words would change everything, and he knew it. "Ryan is having an inappropriate relationship with one of the castle servants. A girl named Maya Johnson. I saw them together this morning, Father. They declared their love for each other." The silence that followed was deafening. King Richard's face went through several emotions: disbelief, anger, and finally, cold calculation. "You're certain of what you saw?" "Completely certain. They kissed, Father. In our library, where the portraits of our ancestors watch from the walls." King Richard closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, David saw something that made his stomach twist, not just anger, but profound disappointment. "How long?" the king asked quietly. "I don't know, but from their conversation, it's been going on for some time." The king walked to the window, looking out at the smoke still rising from Millbrook Village. When he spoke again, his voice was harder than winter stone. "When Ryan returns from the village, bring him to me immediately. And bring the girl as well." "What will you do?" David asked, though part of him already knew. "What I must," King Richard replied. "For the kingdom." But while David was betraying his brother's secret, Maya was making a discovery that would shatter everything she thought she knew about herself. Alone in the library after Ryan's departure, Maya found herself drawn to the section of ancient family records she'd never dared explore before. Books bound in leather so old it was nearly black, filled with genealogies and bloodline charts dating back centuries. She wasn't sure what made her pull down the volume marked "Noble Houses of the Southern Provinces," but something called to her. Some instinct she couldn't name. Maya flipped through pages of names and dates, most meaning nothing to her, until she reached a section that made her heart stop. House of Blackwood. A noble family that had served the crown for generations until they'd been stripped of their titles and lands 30 years ago for supporting the wrong side in a succession dispute. And there, in careful script, were the names: Lord Thomas Blackwood and Lady Catherine Blackwood, along with their children, including a daughter named Maya, born 20 years ago, presumed dead when the family estate burned during the political upheaval. Maya's hands shook as she read the entry again. And again. The dates matched. The name matched. But it was the small portrait beside the entry that made her certain, a miniature painting of Lady Catherine Blackwood, who had the same amber eyes, the same stubborn chin, the same slightly crooked nose that Maya saw in her mirror every day. She wasn't Maya Johnson, orphaned servant girl. She was Maya Blackwood, daughter of disgraced nobility. Her parents hadn't died in a storm, they died in a political purge. She'd been saved by loyal servants who'd hidden her identity and raised her as their own. Which meant she wasn't really a commoner at all. She had noble blood, tainted noble blood, but noble blood nonetheless. And that changed everything about her relationship with Ryan. Just as Maya was processing this earth-shattering revelation, the library doors burst open. But it wasn't Ryan returning from battle. It was Captain Harrison of the Royal Guard, along with 6 armed soldiers. "Maya Johnson," Captain Harrison said formally, "by order of His Majesty King Richard Constantine, you are under arrest for crimes against the crown." Maya's world spun. What crimes? I've done nothing wrong. Seduction of the royal heir. Conspiracy against the throne. Treason. As the soldiers moved toward her, Maya clutched the genealogy book to her chest. The book that proved she wasn't who everyone thought she was. The book that might save her, or damn her even further. "Please," she said desperately. "I need to speak with the king. There's something he doesn't know, something that changes everything." But Captain Harrison wasn't listening. The chains clicked around Maya's wrists with a sound like breaking hearts. Outside, the church bells that had announced the morning's crisis were still ringing. But now they seemed to toll not for the village under attack, but for a love story that was about to become a kingdom's nightmare. What will King Richard do when he discovers his son's forbidden love? How will Ryan react when he returns to find Maya arrested? And will Maya's shocking discovery about her true identity save her, or make everything infinitely worse? Ryan returned from Millbrook village as the sun was setting, his armor stained with soot and blood, his heart heavy with the weight of what he'd witnessed. They'd saved most of the villagers, but 12 families had lost everything. Homes reduced to ash. Livestock scattered or stolen. Children crying for parents who would never come home. But as devastating as the raid had been, nothing could have prepared him for what waited in his own castle. "Your Highness," Captain Harrison intercepted him before he could even dismount his horse. "His Majesty requires your immediate presence in the throne room." Ryan frowned. Usually after a mission like this, he'd report to his father privately, share details over a quiet meal while they planned the kingdom's response. A formal summons to the throne room meant something serious. Something official. Something wrong. "Let me wash and change first," Ryan said, exhaustion weighing down his words. "I'm sorry, Your Highness, but the king was very specific." Immediately, a cold dread began building in Ryan's chest as he walked through the castle corridors. Servants he'd known for years wouldn't meet his eyes. Guards stood straighter, more formal than usual. Even the very air seemed to vibrate with tension. When the great doors of the throne room swung open, Ryan's world tilted. There was his father, King Richard, seated on the throne with an expression of stone. There was his brother David, standing to the right with guilt written across his features. There was the full royal court, nobles, advisers, and officials, assembled as if for a trial. And there, in the center of it all, was Maya. She knelt on the marble floor, wrists bound in iron shackles, her servant's dress torn and dirty. But her chin was raised, her amber eyes blazing with defiance even in chains. When she saw Ryan enter, Something flickered across her face, relief, love, and heartbreaking apology all mixed together. "Ryan," King Richard's voice boomed through the throne room, formal and cold. "Prince Ryan Constantine, heir to the throne of Valdoria, you will kneel before your king." Ryan's training kicked in automatically. In public, before the court, he was not a son but a subject. He dropped to one knee, though his eyes never left Maya. "Father," he said carefully, "what is the meaning of this?" "The meaning," King Richard said, rising from his throne, "is that you have brought shame upon our bloodline, disgrace upon our crown, and danger upon our kingdom." Ryan's heart hammered against his ribs. They knew. Somehow, they knew about him and Maya. "I don't understand," he said, though the lie tasted bitter. "Don't you?" King Richard descended the throne steps slowly, each footfall echoing like judgment. "Then perhaps you can explain why you were seen declaring love to a servant girl. Why you were witnessed kissing her in our sacred library, beneath the portraits of kings who died to protect the honor you so casually cast aside." Ryan closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, he looked directly at his father with the same defiance Maya showed. "Because I do love her," he said simply. "And she loves me." Gasps echoed through the throne room. Several noble ladies reached for their smelling salts. Ryan heard his brother David make a small sound, surprise or regret, he couldn't tell which. But King Richard's expression didn't change. "Do you understand what you've done? What you've risked?" "I've fallen in love, father. Not committed treason." "Haven't you?" The king's voice rose. "Our alliance with the northern kingdoms depends on your marriage to Princess Catherine. Negotiations that have taken years, agreements that ensure peace for our people. And you would throw it all away for a dalliance with a servant." Ryan stood then, protocol forgotten. "It's not a dalliance. Maya is the most extraordinary woman I've ever known. She has more wisdom, more kindness, more genuine nobility than half the court combined." "She has no nobility at all," King Richard roared. "She's a servant girl who has seduced my heir with whatever feminine wiles." "That's not true," Maya spoke for the first time, her voice carrying clearly through the throne room despite her kneeling position. "And your majesty, there's something you need to know about my identity." "Silence," the king commanded. "You have no permission to speak in this court." But Maya continued anyway, her voice growing stronger. "I am not Maya Johnson, daughter of servants. I am Maya Blackwood, last surviving child of House Blackwood." The throne room erupted. Ryan stared at Maya in shock. Blackwood? The noble family that had been stripped of lands and titles before he was born? The family that had supposedly died out completely? King Richard's face went white, then red with fury. "Impossible. The Blackwoods are extinct. Their line ended 30 years ago." "No, your majesty," Maya said, struggling to her feet despite the chains. "I survived. I was hidden by loyal servants who raised me as their own, but I carry the bloodline of House Blackwood in my veins." "You lie," Prince David said suddenly, stepping forward. "This is clearly a desperate attempt to—" "I have proof," Maya interrupted. "In the library, there's a genealogy of the southern houses. My portrait is there, my birth date, my parents' names. I am Lady Maya Blackwood, daughter of Lord Thomas and Lady Catherine." Ryan's mind raced. If Maya truly was nobility, even disgraced nobility, it changed everything. Not enough to make their marriage acceptable to the northern kingdoms, but enough to make it not the complete impossibility everyone assumed. But King Richard was having none of it. "Even if this preposterous claim were true," he said coldly, "the Blackwoods are traitors. Stripped of honor, stripped of lands, stripped of recognition. Their bloodline is tainted beyond redemption." "Because they chose the wrong side in a political dispute," Maya said fiercely. "Not because they were criminals or villains. They made a choice about who should rule, and they lost. That doesn't make them evil." "It makes them dead," King Richard said with finality. "And it makes you nothing more than the daughter of traitors who somehow escaped justice." Ryan stepped forward, positioning himself between Maya and his father's wrath. "Father, please. If Maya truly is Lady Blackwood, then she has noble blood. The engagement to Princess Catherine was arranged when we all believed she was a commoner. But this changes." This changes nothing. King Richard's voice shook the very walls. The northern kingdoms will never accept the daughter of House Blackwood as their princess. The alliance will crumble. Our borders will be left undefended. Our people will suffer for your selfish desires. Then I'll renounce my claim to the throne, Ryan said quietly. The words fell into the throne room like stones into still water, creating ripples of shock that spread through every person present. "What did you say?" King Richard asked, his voice deadly soft. "I said I'll renounce my claim," Ryan repeated, louder this time. "David can be your heir. I'll take Maya and leave Valdoria. We'll go somewhere far away where our love won't threaten anyone." "Ryan, no," Maya whispered, tears flowing down her cheeks. "You can't abandon your people for me." "I can't abandon you either," Ryan said, turning to look at her with eyes full of pain and love. "I won't let them hurt you." But King Richard was beyond reason now. The careful control he'd maintained was cracking, revealing the fury beneath. "You would abandon your birthright? Desert your people? Forsake every duty you were born to fulfill, all for a girl whose very existence is a reminder of treason?" "For the woman I love," Ryan said simply. "Yes." That's when King Richard played his final card. "Then you leave me no choice," he said, his voice returning to cold formality. "Lady Maya Blackwood, if that is indeed who you are charged with seducing the heir to the throne through deception about your true identity. You are charged with conspiracy against the crown's interests. And you are charged with continuing the treasonous legacy of your condemned bloodline." Ryan went cold. "Father, what are you doing?" "What I must to save this kingdom from your foolishness," King Richard replied. "Lady Maya Blackwood will be tried for her crimes. And if convicted, she will face the same fate as the rest of her family." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. "And if you try to help her escape," King Richard continued, his eyes boring into his son's, "if you take one step to interfere with royal justice, I will strip you of your title, banish you from this kingdom, and declare David my sole heir." Ryan felt the walls closing in around him. Save Maya and lose everything: his crown, his people, his ability to protect her. Or accept his father's judgment and watch the woman he loved face trial for the crime of loving him back. Meanwhile, in the corner of the throne room, someone else was watching this scene unfold with growing horror. Queen Elizabeth, Ryan's mother, had said nothing during the confrontation, but her face was pale with anguish. She loved her son. She wanted his happiness. But she also understood the political realities that King Richard was fighting to preserve. And she was beginning to form a plan that might save them all, or destroy everything she held dear. As guards moved to escort Maya back to the dungeons, she caught Ryan's eyes one last time. "Whatever happens," she mouthed silently, "I love you." Ryan watched helplessly as the woman who owned his heart was led away in chains, charged with crimes that existed only because she dared to love a prince. What he didn't know was that Maya's revelation about her true identity had started something that would soon spiral beyond anyone's control. Word was already spreading through the castle, then beyond to the village, then racing across the kingdom like wildfire. Lady Maya Blackwood was alive. The last heir of a noble house thought extinct was in the royal dungeons, charged with loving the prince. And in the northern kingdoms, Princess Catherine was beginning to hear whispers that her intended bridegroom had found someone else. Let me ask you something, dear viewers. Have you ever been in a situation where every choice seemed wrong? Where trying to save someone you love meant destroying everything else you cared about? Drop a comment and share your thoughts, because Ryan and Maya are about to learn that sometimes love isn't just about two hearts. It's about two kingdoms, two political systems, and thousands of lives hanging in the balance. And don't forget to subscribe, because this story is about to take twists that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about love, loyalty, and the price of following your heart. 3 days passed like a waking nightmare. Maya sat in the castle dungeons, cold stone walls pressing in around her, while above, the kingdom buzzed with rumors that grew wilder by the hour. Some said she was a witch who'd enchanted the prince with dark magic. Others claimed she was a spy from the northern kingdoms, sent to destroy the royal engagement from within. But the truth was far more dangerous than any rumor. Ryan hadn't slept since Maya's arrest. He paced his chambers like a caged wolf, his mind racing through impossible scenarios. Every plan he conceived ended the same way, with Maya dead and his kingdom in chaos, or with Maya saved and thousands of innocent people paying the price. He was trapped, and his father knew it. That's why what happened next would change everything. It started when Queen Elizabeth requested a private audience with her husband. For 30 years of marriage, she had been the perfect royal wife, supportive, diplomatic, never interfering with matters of state. King Richard trusted her judgment completely, which is exactly what she was counting on. "My love," she said, closing the door to his private study, "we need to discuss the situation with Ryan and the Blackwood girl." King Richard looked up from the reports he'd been reading, damage assessments from the Northland raids, correspondence from Princess Catherine's father, letters from nobles throughout the kingdom expressing their shock at the royal scandal. "There's nothing to discuss, Elizabeth. The girl will stand trial tomorrow, and Ryan will do his duty to the crown." "Will he?" Queen Elizabeth asked quietly. "Because from where I stand, it looks like we're about to lose our son forever. Either he'll watch the woman he loves die and never forgive us, or he'll do something desperate that destroys us all." King Richard set down his papers. "What would you have me do? Let him marry a traitor's daughter and watch our alliance with the North crumble?" "I would have you listen to what I learned today," Elizabeth said, her voice carrying a weight that made her husband pay attention. "About the Blackwood family. About what really happened 30 years ago." "I know what happened. Thomas Blackwood chose the wrong side in the succession dispute. He paid the price for treason." "Did he?" Elizabeth moved closer, her eyes bright with something Richard had never seen before, a kind of fierce determination that reminded him why he'd fallen in love with her decades ago. Or did Thomas Blackwood discover something that certain people needed to keep buried? King Richard frowned. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about why I've spent the last 3 days in the castle archives, reading documents that haven't been touched in 30 years. I'm talking about what I found hidden in the sealed records of the succession crisis." Elizabeth pulled a leather portfolio from beneath her cloak and set it on Richard's desk. "The official story says that Thomas Blackwood supported Prince Edward's claim to the throne over your father's claim. That he raised arms against the rightful king and was executed for treason." "Because that's what happened." "No, my love. That's what everyone was told happened." Elizabeth opened the portfolio, revealing yellowed documents covered in faded ink. "But the truth is far more complicated." King Richard leaned forward, studying the papers. Court records, personal letters, financial documents, all bearing the seal of the Royal Archives, all dated 30 years ago. "Thomas Blackwood wasn't supporting Prince Edward's claim," Elizabeth continued. "He was investigating something far more dangerous. He discovered evidence that Prince Edward was secretly negotiating with the Eastern Empire to sell them Valdorian territories in exchange for military support." Richard's blood went cold. The Eastern Empire had been their greatest enemy for generations. If Prince Edward had been willing to sell out his own kingdom— "That's impossible," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Is it? Look at this." Elizabeth pulled out a letter, written in Prince Edward's own hand. A promise to cede 3 border provinces to the Eastern Empire upon his coronation. In exchange, they would provide 20,000 soldiers to help him claim the throne. Richard stared at the letter, his mind reeling. If this was real— "Thomas Blackwood found these documents," Elizabeth continued. "He brought them to your father, King William, as evidence of Edward's treachery. But by then, Edward had powerful supporters at court. People who had invested heavily in his claim to the throne." "Who?" Richard asked, though he was beginning to suspect the answer. "Lord Chancellor Morrison, General Hertford, Duke Westbrook." Elizabeth named 3 of the kingdom's most powerful noble families, all of whom had secretly pledged support to Edward, all of whom stood to lose everything if his treachery was exposed. Richard felt the world shifting beneath his feet. So they accused Thomas Blackwood of forging the documents. They claimed he was the traitor, that he was working with the Eastern Empire to destabilize the kingdom. And when Thomas tried to defend himself, when he demanded a fair trial to examine the evidence, they had him executed before any investigation could take place, Richard finished, the horrifying picture becoming clear. "Along with his entire family," Elizabeth added softly. "Except for one small daughter who somehow escaped the flames." Richard stared at the documents spread across his desk. 30 years of lies. 30 years of believing that justice had been served when actually an innocent family had been murdered to cover up real treason. "Maya," he whispered. "Maya Blackwood is the daughter of a hero," Elizabeth said firmly. "A man who died trying to save this kingdom from being sold to our enemies. She doesn't carry the blood of traitors, she carries the blood of patriots." But even as Richard processed this earth-shattering revelation, Elizabeth wasn't finished. "There's more," she said, pulling out one final document. "Something I found in Thomas Blackwood's personal papers. Something that changes everything we thought we knew about Maya's relationship with Ryan." Richard looked at the parchment Elizabeth handed him. It was a family tree, carefully documented, showing the Blackwood lineage stretching back 12 generations. And there, clear as daylight, was a connection that made Richard's heart stop. "Look at the maternal line," Elizabeth said quietly. "Thomas Blackwood's wife, Catherine, was born Catherine Constantine." Richard's hands shook as he traced the bloodline. "That's impossible. She was your great-uncle Marcus's daughter. Which makes Maya—" "Our cousin," Richard finished in a whisper. "Maya Blackwood is our blood relative." The implications hit him like a physical blow. Maya wasn't just the daughter of innocent nobles, she was family. Royal family. Which meant her relationship with Ryan wasn't just politically complicated, it was perfectly acceptable, Elizabeth said, reading his thoughts. Cousin marriages have been common in royal bloodlines for centuries. In fact, they're preferred for maintaining the purity of the bloodline. Richard sank into his chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he'd just learned. Everything he'd believed about the Blackwood family was a lie. Everything he'd done to Maya was not just wrong, but a betrayal of his own blood. "We have to stop the trial," he said suddenly. "We have to tell Ryan, tell Maya, tell everyone the truth." "Do we?" Elizabeth asked carefully. "Because there's one more thing you need to consider." "What?" "Lord Chancellor Morrison is still alive. So is Duke Westbrook. 2 of the 3 men who orchestrated the Blackwood massacre are still in positions of power. If we reveal the truth about what happened 30 years ago..." Richard understood immediately. "We'll expose their crimes. They'll be ruined, probably executed. And they'll fight back with everything they have," Elizabeth added. "They'll claim the documents are forgeries. They'll say we're manufacturing evidence to justify Ryan's unsuitable marriage. They might even attempt to overthrow us to save themselves." Richard stared at his wife, seeing her in a completely new light. The quiet, diplomatic queen had just handed him the most dangerous political weapon in the kingdom's history. "So what do you suggest we do?" Elizabeth smiled, and for the first time in days, it was genuinely hopeful. "We save our son's happiness and our kingdom's future. But we do it very, very carefully." Meanwhile, in the dungeons below, Maya was receiving a visitor she never expected. Prince David approached her cell with hesitant steps, his face a mask of guilt and uncertainty. "Lady Maya," he said formally, then stopped. "Or should I say, Cousin Maya?" Maya looked up sharply. "What did you say?" "My mother has been researching your family history. It seems there are things about the Blackwood tragedy that none of us knew." David gripped the cell bars. "Maya, I owe you an apology. What I did, telling my father about you and Ryan. I thought I was protecting the kingdom. But I was wrong. About everything." Maya stood slowly, studying David's face. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because tomorrow, everything changes. My parents have a plan to reveal the truth about your family, to clear the Blackwood name, and to find a way for you and Ryan to be together without destroying our alliance with the North." Maya's heart leaped with hope, but she forced herself to stay cautious. "What kind of plan?" David glanced around, making sure they were alone, then leaned closer to the bars. "They're going to offer Princess Catherine a choice. She can marry Ryan, knowing he loves another woman, or..." "Or what?" David smiled, and for the first time, Maya saw genuine warmth in his expression. "Or she can marry me instead. I've been corresponding with her for months as part of the diplomatic preparations. We've become close. More than close, actually. I think I might love her." Maya stared at him. "You love Princess Catherine?" "I do. And I think she might love me too. Which means everyone gets what they want. The Northern Alliance is preserved, Ryan gets to marry the woman he loves, and I get to step out of my brother's shadow to become something more than just the spare prince. Maya felt tears streaming down her cheeks, tears of relief, of joy, of overwhelming gratitude. There's just one problem, David continued, his expression growing serious. The men who destroyed your family are still alive, still in power. If we expose the truth, they'll try to destroy us all to protect themselves. Then what do? We spring the trap tomorrow, David said. At your trial. In front of the entire court, with representatives from the Northern Kingdoms present. We reveal everything, your true parentage, your royal bloodline, and the real reason your family died. Maya's eyes blazed with determination. And we make sure justice is finally served. Exactly, David said. But Maya, you need to understand, tomorrow will be dangerous. When cornered, desperate men do desperate things. Are you ready for that? Maya thought of her parents, murdered to cover up treason. She thought of 30 years of lies, 30 years of their names being cursed as traitors. She thought of Ryan, suffering because he loved her, and of a kingdom that deserved to know the truth. I've been ready my whole life, she said fiercely. As David walked away, Maya allowed herself to hope for the first time in days. Tomorrow, the truth would finally come to light. Tomorrow, she would clear her family's name and claim her rightful place as Lady Maya Constantine Blackwood, cousin to the king, suitable bride for a prince. Tomorrow, justice would finally be served. But in his chambers high above, Lord Chancellor Morrison was having a very different kind of conversation with Duke Westbrook, because they knew what was coming. They'd been watching, listening, preparing, and they had no intention of going quietly to their graves. The attack came at midnight, 3 hours before Maya's trial was set to begin. Ryan jolted awake to the sound of steel clashing against steel in the corridor outside his chambers. Shouts echoed through the castle, not the organized calls of guards responding to a threat, but the chaotic screams of people fighting for their lives. He grabbed his sword and threw open his door to find Captain Harrison battling 3 men in dark clothing, their faces covered by masks. "Your Highness!" Harrison shouted between sword strikes. "It's an attack. They're trying to reach the dungeons." Ryan's blood turned to ice. "Maya!" He ran toward the dungeons, cutting down 2 assassins who tried to block his path, his heart pounding with terror. This wasn't a random raid or political uprising. This was targeted, planned, designed to eliminate specific people before dawn broke and the truth came to light. But when he reached the dungeon level, what he found was worse than his worst nightmare. The guards were dead. All of them. And Maya's cell door hung open, blood splattered across the stone walls. "No," Ryan whispered, falling to his knees. "No, no, no." "Looking for someone, Your Highness?" Ryan spun to find Lord Chancellor Morrison stepping out of the shadows, his usually pristine robes stained with blood, a cruel smile playing across his lips. "Where is she?" Ryan demanded, raising his sword. "Safe," Morrison said with mock concern. "For now. Though I'm afraid her continued well-being depends entirely on your cooperation." "What do you want?" "What I've always wanted, to protect this kingdom from the chaos that would follow if certain inconvenient truths came to light." Morrison circled Ryan like a predator. "Your mother has been very busy in the archives, hasn't she? Finding documents that should have remained buried forever." Ryan kept his sword between them, mind racing. "You killed the Blackwood family." "I saved this kingdom," Morrison corrected. "Prince Edward would have sold us to the Eastern Empire piece by piece. The Blackwoods would have exposed his plans and plunged us into civil war. I chose the lesser evil. You chose murder. I chose survival." Morrison's eyes gleamed with fanatic conviction. "And now, 30 years later, I'm making the same choice again." That's when Duke Westbrook emerged from another corridor, dragging someone behind him. Ryan's heart stopped. It was Queen Elizabeth, his mother, bound and gagged, her eyes wide with fear above the cloth covering her mouth. "The documents your mother found," Westbrook said conversationally, as if discussing the weather, "where are they?" "I don't know what you're talking about," Ryan lied. Morrison nodded to Westbrook, who pressed a dagger to Queen Elizabeth's throat. A thin line of blood appeared where the blade touched skin. "Let me be more specific," Morrison said. "Your mother discovered certain archived materials that paint the Blackwood tragedy in an unflattering light for those of us who were there. Those documents need to be destroyed before they can cause problems." Ryan's mind raced. His father had the documents in his private study. But if he told them that... "You're going to retrieve those documents," Morrison continued, "and you're going to burn them. Then you're going to stand before the court this morning and publicly confess that Lady Maya Blackwood seduced you with dark magic, that she admitted to being a spy for the Eastern Empire, and that you renounce all feelings for her." "I'll never do that." "Oh, but you will," Westbrook said softly, pressing the blade deeper. "Because if you don't, your mother dies. If you try to warn your father, your mother dies. If you attempt any heroics at all..." "My mother dies," Ryan finished, his heart breaking. "And then," Morrison added with vicious satisfaction, "we'll kill the Blackwood girl anyway. Publicly. As a traitor and a spy. Her death will be slow, painful, and witnessed by the entire kingdom as a warning about what happens to those who threaten our way of life." Ryan closed his eyes, feeling the walls closing in around him. Save his mother and condemn Maya, or save Maya and watch his mother die. There was no third option, no clever solution that saved everyone. This was what real hopelessness felt like. "Choose quickly, Your Highness," Morrison said. "Dawn approaches, and we have a very busy morning ahead of us." But while Ryan faced an impossible choice in the dungeons, something else was happening in the castle courtyard that would change everything. Princess Catherine had arrived. Not at dawn as planned, not with a formal procession and diplomatic ceremonies her station demanded, but in the middle of the night with a small contingent of her most trusted knights. Because Princess Catherine had her own spies, her own sources of information. And she'd learned about Maya's arrest, about the scandal surrounding her intended marriage, about the trial that was supposed to settle everything. She'd also learned something else. Something that made her push her horses to their limits to reach Valdoria before sunrise. Prince David was in love with her. The letters they'd exchanged over the past months hadn't been mere diplomatic courtesy. They'd been two young people, trapped in an arranged marriage neither wanted, finding genuine connection across the distance between kingdoms. David's letters had been full of humor, intelligence, and a kind of gentle wit that made Catherine laugh despite herself. When she'd learned that Prince Ryan loved another woman, Catherine's first emotion wasn't anger or betrayal. It was relief. Now, as she stood in the castle courtyard with travel dust still on her cloak, she made a decision that would save everyone, if she wasn't already too late. "I demand to see King Richard immediately," she told the night guards. "I don't care that it's the middle of the night. I don't care about protocol. I need to speak with him now." Meanwhile, King Richard was dealing with his own crisis. The attack on the castle had awakened him, and when he'd gone to check on the dungeon security, he'd found the bodies, the open cell, and signs of struggle everywhere. Maya was gone. Ryan was missing. Elizabeth wasn't in her chambers. And the documents that could clear the Blackwood name, the documents that could save his son's happiness, were still locked in his private study. But for how much longer? Richard grabbed the leather portfolio and ran through the castle corridors, shouting orders to his remaining guards, trying to piece together what was happening and how to stop it. That's when he collided with Princess Catherine in the main hall. "Your Majesty," Catherine said breathlessly. "Thank goodness you're safe. I have information about what's happening." "You know about the attack?" "I know about the conspiracy," Catherine corrected. "My spies have been watching Lord Morrison and Duke Westbrook for weeks. We suspected they were planning something desperate when news of Lady Maya's noble heritage began to spread." Richard stared at her. "Your spies knew about Maya's heritage?" "We know everything, Your Majesty. About the Blackwood family's true loyalty. About the documents you've discovered. About the men who've been ruling from the shadows for 30 years. Catherine's eyes blazed with determination. "And we know they've taken hostages tonight to prevent the truth from coming to light." "How could you possibly know all this?" Catherine smiled grimly. "Because the northern kingdoms have been investigating the same conspiracy for years. The Eastern Empire didn't just try to buy Prince Edward 30 years ago. They've been working to destabilize this entire region ever since. Morrison and Westbrook aren't just covering up old crimes. They're still working for the enemy." Richard felt the world tilt around him. Still working for them? The raids on your border villages? The attacks that have been increasing over the past months? They weren't random. Someone's been feeding the Eastern Empire information about your defenses, your troop movements, your weaknesses. The horrible truth crashed over Richard like a wave. Morrison and Westbrook. They've been selling your kingdom piece by piece, just like Prince Edward planned to do 30 years ago. And Lady Maya's trial was supposed to be the perfect distraction while they completed their final betrayal. What final betrayal? Catherine pulled a scroll from her cloak. At dawn, Eastern Empire forces are supposed to attack your capital. While your court is focused on the trial, while your defenses are concentrated here at the castle, 10,000 enemy soldiers will pour through the borders that Morrison's information left undefended. Richard's knees almost buckled. His kingdom wasn't just facing a scandal, it was facing invasion. Conquest. The complete destruction of everything he'd sworn to protect. But there's hope, Catherine continued quickly. My father sent me with 1,000 knights, hidden just beyond your borders. If we can coordinate with your forces, if we can expose the traitors before they complete their plan. We can save everyone, Richard finished. Everyone except the people Morrison and Westbrook have taken hostage, Catherine said softly. Your Majesty, I need you to know, I'm not here to marry Prince Ryan. I'm here to marry Prince David, if he'll have me. This was never about politics or alliances. This was about love and justice, and stopping a conspiracy that threatens all our kingdoms. Richard looked at this remarkable young woman who'd ridden through the night to save his family and his realm, and felt hope kindle in his chest for the first time in days. Then let's go save them all, he said. But in the dungeons below, Maya was facing her own moment of despair. Chained to a wall in a hidden chamber beneath the castle, she could hear Morrison and Westbrook's voices echoing from the corridors as they laid their trap for Ryan. She'd tried everything, picking the locks, working the chains loose, even attempting to break the stone itself. But she was trapped, helpless to save the man she loved or the kingdom that was about to fall. That's when she heard a voice in the darkness. Weak, barely a whisper, but unmistakably familiar. Maya! She turned toward the sound and gasped. Chained to the wall beside her, barely visible in the dim light, was someone she'd thought she'd never see again. Her brother James. The brother she believed had died in the fire that claimed her family 30 years ago. James, she whispered, hardly daring to believe it. You're alive. Barely, he croaked. Morrison's been keeping me prisoner all these years, using me as insurance, in case the truth about our family ever came to light. Maya's heart shattered and rebuilt itself in the same moment. Her brother, her family, was alive. But they were both about to die, and Ryan was walking into a trap that would doom everyone she loved. Unless she could find a way to break free and warn him in time. Maya stared at her brother's face in the dim dungeon light, 30 years of grief and longing crashing over her like a wave. James was alive. Scarred, weakened by years of captivity, but alive. How? She whispered. I saw the fire. I saw everything burn. Morrison's men pulled me out before the flames reached the cellar, James said, his voice rough from years of rarely speaking. They needed one of us alive, in case questions were ever asked about our family's loyalty. Insurance, they called me. Maya's heart blazed with fury. They kept you prisoner for 30 years? In chambers like this, moved from castle to castle, always hidden, always watched. James's eyes met hers with desperate intensity. Maya, they're planning something terrible. Not just for us, but for the entire kingdom. I know. The invasion at dawn. More than that. James struggled against his chains, trying to sit up straighter. There's a signal Morrison is supposed to give, a fire lit from the highest tower when the trial begins. It tells the Eastern forces that the royal family is distracted, that the capital's defenses are focused on the castle. Maya's mind raced. If we could prevent that signal, the Eastern army would assume the plan had failed. They'd retreat rather than attack a fully prepared defense. Hope flickered in Maya's chest. But they were both chained to stone walls, locked in a hidden chamber with no apparent way out. That's when James smiled, the first real smile Maya had seen from him. There's something Morrison never knew about our family, he said quietly. Something our father taught me before he died. What? James twisted his wrist in a way that looked agonizing, and Maya heard a soft click. His manacle fell open. The Blackwoods were locksmiths before we were nobles, he said, working on his other restraint. Father made sure I learned the old skills, just in case we ever needed them. Within minutes, James had freed himself and was working on Maya's chains. His hands shook from years of captivity, but his fingers remembered the ancient techniques. "Can you walk?" Maya asked as her own restraints fell away. "I can do whatever needs doing," James replied fiercely. "We have our family's honor to restore." Meanwhile, in the castle's main hall, the most unusual war council in history was forming. King Richard stood before a map of the kingdom, Princess Catherine at his side, while Prince David coordinated with Catherine's northern knights and the loyal castle guards who'd survived the midnight attack. "Morrison has Ryan and the Queen somewhere in the castle," Richard said grimly. "He'll use them to force compliance with his demands." "And if Ryan refuses?" Catherine asked. "Then we lose everything, my family, the kingdom, and any chance of stopping this conspiracy." Prince David looked up from the defensive plans he'd been studying. "There might be another way." "What do you mean?" "Morrison expects Ryan to appear at the trial and publicly denounce Maya. But what if it isn't Ryan who appears?" Richard frowned. "I don't understand." David straightened, and for the first time in his life, he looked every inch the prince he was born to be. "What if it's me? I could take Ryan's place, claim I've discovered Maya's true innocence, and expose Morrison's conspiracy before he realizes what's happening." "That's incredibly dangerous," Catherine said softly. "If Morrison suspects deception." "He'll kill the hostages," David finished. "I know. But if we do nothing, they die anyway. And the kingdom falls." Richard studied his younger son, the prince who'd lived in shadows, who'd always been second choice, who was now offering to risk everything to save his brother and their realm. "You'd do this, even knowing the cost if you fail?" "Father," David said quietly, "I've spent my whole life being the spare prince. Let me finally be the hero." Catherine stepped forward and took David's hand. "Not alone. If we're going to save this kingdom, we do it together." Richard felt his heart swell with pride and terror in equal measure. But before he could respond, a commotion at the hall's entrance made everyone turn. Two figures stumbled through the doorway, Maya and James, supporting each other, covered in dirt and blood but very much alive and free. "Maya!" David exclaimed, rushing toward them. "Your Majesties!" Maya gasped, barely able to stand. "We have to stop the signal. Morrison plans to light a fire from the North Tower when the trial begins. It's the sign for the Eastern invasion to commence." "We know about the invasion," Richard said quickly. "Princess Catherine brought warning and reinforcements." "But how did you escape?" James stepped forward, and Richard's face went white with shock. "Impossible. You're dead. The Blackwood son died in the fire." "The fire that Morrison set to cover up his crimes," James said, his voice growing stronger with each word. "Your Majesty, I've been Morrison's prisoner for 30 years. I've heard every conversation, every plan, every betrayal. I can prove everything." Richard staggered under the weight of this revelation. Not only had his ancestors executed innocent people, but they'd been torturing a survivor in secret for 3 decades. "James," he said formally, "I cannot begin to apologize for the injustices done to your family. But can you help us stop this madness?" "With pleasure," James replied. "Morrison is keeping Ryan and Queen Elizabeth in the old armory beneath the Great Hall. There are 6 guards, but they're expecting Maya to remain captured. If we move quickly, we can save them and stop the signal," Maya finished. Catherine stepped forward. "And while you're rescuing the hostages, my northern forces can intercept the Eastern army at the border. But only if we coordinate perfectly." Richard looked around at this unlikely group, his younger son stepping into leadership, a foreign princess who'd chosen love over politics, and 2 Blackwood survivors ready to reclaim their family's honor. "Then we save everyone," he said with growing conviction. "David, you take a team to rescue Ryan and Elizabeth. Catherine, signal your forces to move against the Eastern army. Maya and James, you're with me. We're going to make sure that signal fire never gets lit." As they prepared to split up, Maya caught David's arm. "Your Highness," she said quietly, "thank you for believing in us, for being willing to sacrifice everything to make this right." David smiled, not the bitter expression she'd seen before, but something warm and genuine. "Maya, you're about to become my sister-in-law. Family protects family." That simple statement, "family protects family," gave Maya strength she didn't know she had. For 30 years, she'd believed she was alone in the world. Now she discovered not only was her brother alive, but she was gaining an entire royal family who were willing to fight for her happiness. As they moved through the castle corridors, splitting up to handle their separate missions, Maya felt something she hadn't experienced since childhood, the absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged, with people who would never abandon her. But their success depended on perfect timing and incredible courage. One mistake, one moment of hesitation, and everyone they loved would pay the ultimate price. The rescue mission began with David and 6 knights moving silently through the lower levels of the castle. The old armory was exactly where James had said it would be, guarded by Morrison's men who clearly weren't expecting trouble. The battle was brief but vicious. David fought like a man possessed, driven by love for his brother and fury at the injustices that had been done. When the smoke cleared, all 6 guards were down, and David was kicking open the heavy wooden door. Inside, he found Ryan chained to the wall and Queen Elizabeth bound in a corner, both alive but showing signs of rough treatment. "David." Ryan's voice was hoarse with relief and confusion. "How did you find us?" "Long story," David said, working frantically on the locks. "Maya and James escaped. We know about the conspiracy, and we're going to end this right now." "James," Elizabeth gasped as David freed her. "The Blackwood son is alive?" "Very much so," David confirmed. "And he's with Father and Maya right now, making sure Morrison's signal never reaches the Eastern Army." Ryan's eyes blazed as his shackles fell away. "Where's Morrison?" "Probably wondering why his guards haven't reported in," David said grimly. "But Ryan, there's something you need to know. Princess Catherine is here. She came to help save Maya and expose the conspiracy. And she's not here to marry you." Ryan stared at his brother. "What do you mean?" David's face colored slightly. "I mean she's here to marry me, if I'm brave enough to ask her." Despite everything they'd just endured, Ryan began to laugh. "David, you magnificent fool. Of course she'll say yes." As the 3 of them made their way back toward the main castle, Ryan felt hope blazing in his chest for the first time in days. Maya was safe. His family was together. And love, real, honest, courageous love, was about to triumph over 30 years of lies and betrayal. But in the North Tower, the final confrontation was just beginning. The North Tower had never seemed so tall. Maya climbed the winding stone steps with her brother James beside her and King Richard behind them, their footsteps echoing in the narrow stairwell. Above them, they could hear Morrison's voice giving orders, preparing to light the signal fire that would doom the kingdom. "Remember," Richard whispered as they neared the top, "we need him alive. Dead, he's a martyr. Alive, he can confess everything to the entire court." Maya's hand tightened on her brother's arm. After 30 years of believing she was alone, after days of thinking she'd lost everything, she was finally going to see justice done for her family. They burst through the tower door together. Lord Chancellor Morrison stood at the great brazier, torch in hand, Duke Westbrook beside him. Both men spun in shock at the interruption. "Impossible," Morrison breathed, staring at James as if seeing a ghost. "You're supposed to be chained in the dungeons." "A lot of things are supposed to be different than they are," James replied calmly. "Like my family being alive instead of murdered for trying to save this kingdom." Morrison's face twisted with rage and desperation. "You know nothing. I saved Valdoria from civil war, from being sold to the Eastern Empire piece by piece. By becoming Eastern spies yourselves," King Richard stepped forward, documents in hand. "By continuing Prince Edward's work for 30 years while pretending to serve my family." "Your Majesty," Westbrook said desperately, "surely you can't believe the word of these traitors over your most loyal advisers." "I believe the evidence," Richard replied, holding up the papers Queen Elizabeth had discovered. Financial records showing payments from the Eastern Empire. communication logs detailing troop movements shared with enemy forces, and testimony from a witness who's been watching you for 3 decades. Morrison's torch wavered in his hand. Even if that were true, you're too late. The signal is supposed to be lit at dawn. My forces are watching for it. Your forces? Maya stepped forward, her voice carrying all the authority of her noble bloodline. You mean the Eastern Army that's already been intercepted by Northern Kingdom reinforcements? Morrison's face went white. What are you talking about? Princess Catherine arrived last night with 1,000 knights, Richard explained with grim satisfaction. They've been watching the borders for hours, waiting for your invasion force. By now, the Eastern Army has either retreated or been captured. And even if they hadn't, James added, the signal was supposed to come from a loyal Valdorian chancellor, not a man about to be arrested for treason. Morrison looked between them, understanding finally dawning that his decades-long conspiracy had crumbled in a single night. His face shifted from shock to fury to something far more dangerous, desperation. Then we all die together, he snarled, raising the torch toward the brazier. But Maya was already moving. Years of servant work had made her quick and agile, and she tackled Morrison around the waist, sending them both crashing to the stone floor. The torch flew from his hand, clattering across the tower floor, its flame extinguished. James leaped forward to subdue Westbrook while King Richard retrieved the torch and stamped out any remaining sparks. It's over, Richard said firmly as castle guards poured through the door to secure the prisoners. 30 years of lies, 30 years of injustice, 30 years of betrayal, it's finally over. But even as Morrison and Westbrook were led away in chains, the most important moment was yet to come. The great hall of Castle Valdoria had never held so many people. Every noble in the kingdom had been summoned, along with representatives from the northern kingdoms and delegations from neighboring realms. What they witnessed that morning would be talked about for generations. King Richard stood before the assembled court, the documents of truth spread before him on a great table. Beside him stood Queen Elizabeth, Prince Ryan, Prince David, Princess Catherine, and most importantly, Maya and James Blackwood. Lords and ladies of the realm, King Richard began, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall, today we correct an injustice that has poisoned our kingdom for 30 years. He told them everything. About Prince Edward's planned betrayal and the Eastern Empire's gold. About Thomas Blackwood's heroic discovery of the treason and his attempt to save the kingdom. About the conspiracy that murdered an entire innocent family to cover up the real crimes. About the living survivors who proved the truth of everything. Maya and James Blackwood are not the children of traitors, Richard declared, his voice ringing with royal authority. They are the children of heroes. Their father died trying to save this kingdom from being sold to our enemies. Their family deserves not condemnation, but our deepest gratitude. The hall erupted in shocked murmurs, but Richard wasn't finished. Furthermore, he continued, genealogical research has proven that Lady Maya Blackwood carries the bloodline of House Constantine. She is our cousin, our family, and her noble heritage makes her a suitable bride for any prince in this realm. Ryan stepped forward then, taking Maya's hand before the entire assembled court. Lady Maya Blackwood, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the hall, will you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Maya looked out at the faces watching them, some shocked, some delighted, many moved to tears by the story of justice finally served. Then she looked at Ryan, the man who'd been willing to give up everything for her love. Yes, she said simply. With all my heart, yes. The cheer that went up from the crowd shook the very walls of the castle. But the morning held one more surprise. Princess Catherine stepped forward, radiant in her northern silks, and approached Prince David. Before the entire court, she went down on one knee. Prince David Constantine, she said clearly, you have shown more courage, honor, and nobility in these past days than any man I've ever known. Will you accept my hand in marriage, not for politics or alliance, but for love? David stared at her for a moment, hardly believing what he was seeing. Then he knelt beside her, taking her hands in his. Catherine, he said softly, I would be honored to be your husband. The second cheer was even louder than the first. King Richard raised his hand for silence, and when the hall quieted, he made his final proclamation. Let it be recorded in the histories that on this day, love triumphed over conspiracy, truth overcame deception, and justice was finally served. The Blackwood name is restored to honor. Lord James Blackwood will be granted lands and title befitting his family's service to the crown. And Lady Maya Blackwood will become Princess Maya, future Queen of Valdoria." He paused, looking out at the assembled nobles with eyes that missed nothing. "Let it also be recorded that any who oppose this union, any who question the nobility of House Blackwood, or any who threaten the happiness of our royal family will answer to the crown's justice." The warning was clear, and the message was received. As the formal ceremonies concluded and the crowd began to disperse, Maya found herself standing with Ryan in the same library where they'd first fallen in love. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the books where she'd learned to read, where she'd shared her dreams, where she discovered that a servant girl could capture a prince's heart. "I keep thinking I'm going to wake up," she said softly, leaning against Ryan's chest. "That this is all too perfect to be real." Ryan wrapped his arms around her, breathing in the scent of her hair. "It's real," he said. "We're real. And we're going to spend the rest of our lives proving that love really can conquer anything." Maya tilted her face up to his. "Even empires." "Especially empires," Ryan replied, and kissed her as the morning sun painted everything gold. Outside the library windows, the kingdom of Valdoria stretched in all directions, safe, secure, and ruled by a family that had learned the most important lesson of all, that love, honor, and justice are the only foundations strong enough to build a lasting empire upon. And in the castle dungeons, Lord Chancellor Morrison sat in the same cell where Maya had once been prisoner, contemplating the ruins of his life's work. His conspiracy had failed. His allies were captured or fled. The kingdom he'd tried to sell was stronger than ever. But perhaps most bitter of all, the love story he'd tried to destroy had not only survived, it had saved everything he'd tried to destroy. 6 months later, the cathedral bells of Valdoria rang out across the kingdom like liquid gold, their joyous peals carrying news that had already spread to every corner of the realm. Prince Ryan Constantine was marrying Lady Maya Blackwood, and the entire kingdom was celebrating. Maya stood before the great mirror in the royal chambers, hardly recognizing the woman looking back at her. Gone was the simple servant's dress, replaced by a gown of ivory silk that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. The Blackwood family jewels, recovered from the royal treasury where they'd been held in safekeeping for 30 years, adorned her throat and wrists, each sapphire catching the morning sunlight like captured stars. But the most beautiful thing about her reflection wasn't the dress or the jewels. It was the joy radiating from her eyes, the peace in her smile, the absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. "You look like a queen," said a familiar voice behind her. Maya turned to find her brother James standing in the doorway, resplendent in the formal attire of Lord Blackwood. The past months had been kind to him. Proper food, exercise, and freedom had restored much of his strength, and the haunted look had faded from his eyes, replaced by quiet contentment. "I feel like I'm dreaming," Maya admitted, smoothing her skirts nervously. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is real." James crossed the room and took her hands, his touch steady and reassuring. "It's real, sister. And it's what our parents would have wanted, their daughter happy, their family name restored, their sacrifice finally honored." Maya's eyes filled with tears that she quickly blinked away. "I just wish they could be here to see it." "They are," James said softly. "I feel them with us today, celebrating alongside everyone else." A gentle knock at the door interrupted them, and Queen Elizabeth entered, carrying a small velvet box. "Maya, my dear," she said warmly, "you look absolutely radiant. Ryan is going to forget how to breathe when he sees you." Elizabeth had become like the mother Maya had lost, guiding her through the complexities of royal life with patience and love. The guilt she'd initially felt about her family's role in the Blackwood tragedy had transformed into fierce protective devotion to Maya and James. "I have something for you," Elizabeth continued, opening the velvet box to reveal a delicate silver tiara set with diamonds and sapphires. "This belonged to my grandmother, Queen Isabella. She said it should only be worn by a woman who married for love, not politics." As Elizabeth placed the tiara on Maya's head, Maya felt the weight of history and hope combined. She was no longer Maya Johnson, the invisible servant girl. She was no longer just Maya Blackwood, the lost daughter of disgraced nobles. She was about to become Princess Maya, future Queen of Valdoria, a woman who would help rule a kingdom alongside the man she loved. "Are you ready?" Elizabeth asked gently. Maya took a deep breath, looking at herself one final time in the mirror. The woman looking back was strong, confident, and absolutely certain of her choices. "I'm ready," she said. The cathedral was packed beyond capacity. Every noble family in the kingdom was present, along with delegations from neighboring realms who'd come to witness this extraordinary love story. The Northern Kingdom delegation, led by Princess Catherine's parents, occupied places of honor, celebrating not just this wedding but the marriage of their own daughter to Prince David the week before. That ceremony had been intimate and beautiful. Catherine radiant in northern silks, David transformed from spare prince to devoted husband in the span of single vows. They'd honeymooned in the mountains, returning just in time for Ryan and Maya's wedding with faces glowing with newlywed happiness. Now, as Maya walked down the cathedral aisle on King Richard's arm, an honor that symbolized the complete acceptance of her as family, every person in attendance rose to their feet. She could see Ryan waiting at the altar, magnificent in his ceremonial armor, his face illuminated with love and wonder as he watched her approach. Beside him stood David as best man, grinning with unrestrained joy for his brother's happiness. In the front row, Catherine dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief while James stood proudly with the other nobles, his presence a living reminder that justice could triumph even over decades of lies. As Richard placed Maya's hand in Ryan's, the king whispered just loud enough for them to hear, "Your parents would be so proud, Maya." Both sets of them. The ceremony itself was beautiful, but what made it extraordinary was the obvious love between bride and groom. When they exchanged vows, promising to love, honor, and support each other through whatever challenges life might bring, there wasn't a dry eye in the cathedral. "I promise," Maya said, her voice clear and strong, "to stand beside you not just as your wife, but as your partner in ruling this kingdom with wisdom, justice, and compassion." "I promise," Ryan replied, his eyes never leaving hers, "to love you not just as my bride, but as my equal, my counselor, and my best friend for all the days of our lives." When the priest pronounced them husband and wife, their kiss was witnessed by hundreds but felt entirely private, a moment of perfect love in a perfect setting. The celebration that followed lasted 3 days and nights. The castle was transformed into a wonderland of flowers, music, and laughter. Peasants danced alongside nobles, foreign diplomats shared tables with local merchants, and everywhere the story of Maya and Ryan's love was told and retold, growing more magical with each telling. On the second night of festivities, Maya found herself dancing with her new husband in the same ballroom where she'd once cleaned floors as a servant. The irony wasn't lost on her, but instead of sadness, she felt only gratitude for the journey that had brought her here. "What are you thinking about?" Ryan asked, spinning her gracefully around the dance floor. "About how different everything is now," Maya replied. 6 months ago, I was scrubbing these floors. Tonight, I'm dancing on them as a princess." "Do you miss it?" Ryan asked. "The simplicity of your old life?" Maya considered this seriously. "I miss the innocence, sometimes. The days when my biggest worry was whether the bread would rise properly. But I wouldn't trade this, us, for anything. We have the power to make real changes now, to help people, to ensure that what happened to my family never happens to anyone else." Ryan's love for her deepened even further as he heard the wisdom in her words. Maya hadn't just married him for love. She understood the responsibility that came with their positions, and she was ready to embrace it fully. "What's our first priority as rulers?" he asked, knowing she'd already been thinking about this. "Education," Maya said without hesitation. "Literacy programs for every village in the kingdom. Libraries in every town. No more children growing up unable to read, unable to access knowledge that could change their lives." "Because knowledge is power," Ryan said, remembering her struggles to learn reading in the castle library. "Because knowledge is freedom," Maya corrected. "And every person in this kingdom deserves to be free to pursue their dreams, regardless of the circumstances of their birth." As they danced, other couples joined them on the floor. David and Catherine, still glowing with newlywed happiness. James with Lady Margaret, a kind widow who'd caught his eye during the wedding preparations. King Richard and Queen Elizabeth, renewed in their love after weathering the crisis together. Even some of the guests were finding romance. The evening had that magical quality where love seemed to be in the very air, inspiring hearts throughout the ballroom. But for Maya, the most beautiful moment came near midnight, when she and Ryan stepped onto the balcony for a moment of quiet together. The kingdom spread out below them, peaceful and secure under the starlit sky. Lights twinkled in village windows across the valley, each one representing families sleeping safely because justice had been served and love had triumphed. "Look," Ryan said softly, pointing to the horizon. "You can just see the ocean from here." Maya followed his gaze and gasped. There, faint but unmistakable, was a line of silver that marked where the sea met the sky, the ocean she'd dreamed of seeing since childhood. "We'll go there," Ryan promised. "On our honeymoon. You'll finally see the waves you've wondered about for so long." Maya leaned against him, feeling perfectly, completely happy. "I love you," she whispered. "Not just because you're wonderful, but because you make me believe in myself. You make me feel like I can do anything." "Because you can," Ryan replied, holding her close. "We can. Together, there's nothing we can't accomplish." As if summoned by their words, a shooting star blazed across the night sky, trailing silver fire in its wake. "Make a wish," Maya said, remembering childhood superstitions. But Ryan shook his head. "I don't need to wish for anything. I already have everything I could ever want." Maya smiled, understanding exactly what he meant. They had love, they had family, they had purpose, and they had a future bright with possibility. 1 year later, Princess Maya, now beloved throughout the kingdom for her literacy programs, her compassion for the poor, and her unwavering support of justice, stood in the royal nursery, humming softly as she rocked her infant daughter. Little Princess Elena had her father's dark hair and her mother's amber eyes, and she was already showing signs of the curiosity and intelligence that ran in both family lines. "She's going to change the world," Ryan said from the doorway, his voice full of wonder as he watched his wife and daughter. "She already has," Maya replied, looking up at him with eyes full of love. "She's made our world perfect." James had married Lady Margaret and was ruling his restored lands with wisdom and justice. David and Catherine were expecting their first child and had proved to be remarkable rulers of their combined northern Valdorian territories. Queen Elizabeth had started a school for noble ladies, teaching them that they could be more than just ornamental wives. Even King Richard had embraced change, working with his sons and daughters-in-law to create the most progressive, peaceful, and prosperous kingdom in the region. As for the villains of their story, Morrison had died in prison, unrepentant to the end. Westbrook had fled to the Eastern Empire, where he lived in exile, a broken man whose schemes had ultimately strengthened the very kingdom he'd tried to destroy. But in the royal nursery, surrounded by love and hope, Maya didn't think about the darkness they'd overcome. She thought about the future, about the daughter who would grow up knowing she was loved, about the kingdom that would prosper under wise and compassionate rule, about the love story that had indeed conquered an empire. "Do you know what I learned through all of this?" Maya asked Ryan as he settled beside her, their daughter peaceful in her arms. "What's that?" "That love doesn't actually destroy empires," she said thoughtfully. "Love transforms them. It takes something built on power and fear and makes it into something built on hope and justice instead." Ryan kissed the top of her head, then gently touched their daughter's tiny hand. "I think," he said quietly, "that's the most beautiful way to destroy an empire that's ever been invented." And in the peaceful kingdom of Valdoria, where a servant girl had become a queen and love had indeed conquered all, the future stretched ahead like a golden path, bright with infinite possibility. The end. Dear incredible viewers, you've just witnessed one of the most powerful love stories ever told. A tale of how two hearts, united by pure love, literally saved a kingdom and transformed an empire. Maya and Ryan proved that when love is real, when it's built on respect, understanding, and shared values, it truly can overcome any obstacle. Their story reminds us that our backgrounds don't define our worth, that justice may be delayed but it's never denied, and that sometimes the most extraordinary destinies begin with the simplest moments, like a prince helping a servant girl learn to read in a quiet library. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and share it with someone who believes in the power of true love. Don't forget to subscribe for more incredible tales that will make you believe in magic again. And in the comments below, I want to know, what moment in this story affected you the most? Was it Maya's discovery of her true heritage, Ryan's willingness to give up everything for love, or perhaps the beautiful way justice was finally served? Thank you for joining me on this emotional journey. Until next time, remember, love really can conquer anything, including empires.